Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a whole new season of the Supernatural Files. While we dive into the unexplained and the supernatural realm itself, well, this season we're doing something different because at the end of each episode, we are going to put a preview of the next week episode up. So instead of hanging by a cliffhanger, you guys can get a little taste of what is in store for the next episode, so you can tune in and watch that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another season of the Supernatural Files. While we dive into the unexplained and the supernatural itself, what creatures are we going to come across this season? We don't know which creatures are going to be coming and maybe attacking us, or maybe not. Let's join me for the ride to see if they will attack us or befriend us. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the new season of the Supernatural Files, where we dive into the unexplained and the supernatural realm itself. Today we are going to be talking about none other than the 7 deadly sins. Where were they? Did they magically appear because of some person in the Roman Catholic Church, or was it before then? Stay tuned to find out in the brand new season of the Supernatural Files, Season 2, Episode 1. The 7 deadly sins, or the capital sins that they were referred to in the old days, or the 7 cardinal sins that they were talked about in the Roman Catholic Church back when the Roman Catholic Church was in its all glory days. Are the 7 vices that spur other sins and further immoral behavior, first encountered by Pope Gregory I and elaborated in the 13th century by St. Thomas Aquinas. Don't forget, if you made it this far, to hit the red subscribe button down below, give this video a like, hit the notification bell so you are notified whenever a future video happens, and leave a comment down below. They are number 1. Let's get into lust. Lust, or lechery, is an intense longing. It is usually thought as an intense or unbridled sexual desire, which may lead to fornication, including adultery, rape, bestiality, and other sinful sexual acts. However, lust can also mean other forms of unbridled desire, such as for money or power. Dante, if you haven't heard of him, will link a video somewhere on the top so you can check out our very first ones we did, and we talked about Dante's Inferno. But there are 3 books. So far we have touched on Dante's Inferno, now we're going to touch on Dante's Purgatorio. Dante defined lust as the disordered love for individuals. It is usually often thought as an intense, or it is generally thought the least serious capital sin. It is an abuse of a faculty that humans share with animals, and sins of the flesh are less grievous than spiritual sins. In Dante's Purgatorio, the penitent walks through flames to purge himself of lustful thoughts and feelings. Just imagine you walking through flames, I'm purging my thoughts. Like, whoever thinks that actually works? In Dante's Inferno, unforgiven souls guilty of lust are blown about in restless hurricane-like winds, symbolic of their own lack in self-control, of their lustful passions in earthly life. Now let's move on to gluttony, which we all probably do on a weekly or daily basis, whether it's subconsciously doing it or you're knowingly doing it. Gluttony is the overindulgence and overconsumption of anything to the point of waste. The word derives from the Latin glutter, to gulp down or swallow. One reason for its condemnation is that gorging by the prosperous may leave the needy hungry. Medieval church leaders, such as St. Thomas Aquinas, took a more expansive view of gluttony, arguing that it could be also included in obsessive anticipation of meals in overindulgence in delicacies and costly foods. Aquinas listed 5 forms of gluttony. The first, lente, eating too expensively. Well, we do that on a daily basis anyway, so we're all guilty of that. Number 2, studios, eating too daintily. Number 3, nimbus, eating too much. Number 4, pre, eating too soon. Number 5, eating too eagerly. Number 3 sin, greed, also known as avarice, cupidity, or confessionism. Like lust and gluttony, it is a sin of desire. However, greed, as seen by the church, is applied to artificial, rapacious desire and pursuit of material possessions. Thomas Aquinas wrote, "Greed is against God, just as all mortal sins, and as much as man condemns things eternal for the sake of temporal things." Dante's Purgatory, the penitents are bound and laid face down on the ground for having concentrated excessiveness on earthly thoughts, hoarding materials or objects, theft and robbery, especially by the means of violence, trickery or manipulation of authority, are all actions that may be inspired by greed. Such indeeds can include simony, which one attempts to purchase or sell sacraments, including holy orders and therefore positions of authority in the church hierarchy, as defined in Christian writings outside the church. Greed is an inordinate desire to acquire or possess more than one needs, especially in regards to material wealth. Like pride, it can lead to not just some, but all evil. Number 4, sloth, means without care, refers to a peculiar jumble of notions dating from antiquity and including mental, spiritual, pathological, and physical states. It may be defined as absence. The scope of sloth is wide. Spiritually, it is referred to affliction tending religious persons, especially monks, wherein they became indifferent to their duties and obligations to God. Mentally, sloth has a number of distinctive components, of which the most important is afflictlessness, a lack of any feeling of any oneself or any others. a mind state that gives rise to boredom, rancor, apathy, and a passive intent or sluggish mentation. Physically, it is fundamentally associated with the cessation of motion and indifference to work. It finds expression in laziness, idleness, and indolence. Sloth has also been referred to as a failure to do things that one should do. By the definition, evil exists when good people fail to act. Unlike other capital sins, which are the sins of committing immorally, sloth is a form of omitting responsibilities. It may arise from any other forms of capital vices. For example, a son may omit his duty to his father through anger, while the state inhabitant of sloth is a moral sin, the habit of the soul tending towards the last mortal state of sloth is not moral in itself, except for under certain circumstances. Sloth not only subverts the livelihood of the body, taking no care for its day-to-day provisions, but also slows down the mind, halting its attention to matters of great importance. Sloth hinders man in the form of righteousness undertakings and thus becomes a horrible source of humans' undoing. In Dante's Purgatory, Dante describes the penance for sloth as running continuously at top speed. He also describes sloth as failure to love God with all his heart and mind and soul. And sloth is the middle sin, the only one characterized by an absence or insufficiency to love. Wrath can be described as an uncontrollable anger, rage, or even hatred. Wrath reveals itself in the wish to seek vengeance. In its purest form, wrath presents injuries, violence, and hate that may provoke feuds that can go on for centuries. Wrath may persist long after the person who did a grievous act is dead. Feelings of wrath can manifest in many ways, including impatience, hateful misanthropy, revenge, self-destruction, such as by drug or suicide. According to the cataclysm that happened in the Roman Catholic Church, the neutral act of anger becomes the sin when it is directed to an innocent person, when it is unduly strong or long-lasting, or when it desires excessive punishment. If anger reaches a point, a deliberate desire to kill or seriously wound a neighbor, it is gravely against charity, and it is a mortal sin. Hatred is the sin of desiring someone else may suffer misfortune or evil, and is a mortal sin when one desires grave harm. People feel angry when they sense that someone they care about has been offended, when they are certain about the nature and cause of that angering event, when they are certain someone else is responsible, and when they feel they can still influence the situation or cope with it. Envy, like greed and lust, is characterized by an insatiable desire. It can be described as a sad or resentful covetousness towards the traits or possessions of someone else. It arises from vainglory and severs a man from his neighbor. Malicious envy is similar to jealousy, as they both feel discontent towards someone else's traits, status, ability, or rewards. Different is that the envious also desire the entity covenant. Dante defined envy as a desire to deprave of men of theirs. In Dante's Purgatory, the punishment for the envious is to have their eyes sewn shut with water because they gained sinful pleasure by others, from seeing others brought to the lowest point. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, the struggle aroused by envy has 3 stages. During the first stage, tries to lower another's reputation. In the second stage, the envious person perceives joy to another's misfortune, grief to another one's prosperity. The third stage is hatred, because sorrow becomes hatred. Envy is said to be the motivation between Cain and Abel, because Cain murdered his brother, as Cain envied Abel because God favored Abel's sacrifices over Cain's. We came to the last sin, pride. It's considered almost on every list the most original, most serious of the 7 deadly sins. Out of the most 7, it is the most angelic or demonic. It is also thought to be the source of other capital sins, also known as hubris or futility. It is identified as dangerously corrupt selfishness. Politicians, I'm looking at you. The putting of one's own desires, wants, and whims before the welfare of other people. In even more destructive cases, it is believing that one's is essentially and necessarily better or superior or important than others, failing to recognize the accomplishments of others and excessive admiration of the personal image or self, especially forgetting one's own lack of divinity and failure to recognize one's limits, faults, or wrongs as a human being. Dante's Inferno, Dante's definition of pride was love of self, perverted to hatred, and contempt for one's neighbors. Pride is generally associated with an absence of humility. Well, as you guys can see, we all have done either 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 7 of the deadly sins. The question is, next time you are getting ready to do a sin, are you going to remember that that is a sin and just let it brush away? Or are you going to give in to the temptation and evilness of the 7 hatred deadly sins? Thank you all for joining me. Be sure, if you like the video, be sure to hit the red subscribe button down below. Like the video, click the notification bell to always on, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, I'll be going off into the supernatural realm itself. I'll see you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of A Changeling is a creature of many stories in the folklore, and we have adapted those stories into the United States of humans by fairy or troll creatures. A changeling is usually identified by many various traits. In Irish legend, a fairy child may appear sick, such as jumping about, dancing, or playing an instrument. Various regions in Europe who had been driven into hiding by invaders. Now you're probably asking yourself, how do we countermeasure if our child is actually a changeling? Well, you're in luck, because we're about to go into the countermeasures. How do you spot if your children is a changeling or people from another realm coming to visit us? We are not